Welcome to another episode of Relatively Damaged Live. My name is Angela, and this is
Kat.
The live shows are currently streamed Mondays to Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Remember to follow or subscribe and share with your friends. On the Monday segment of the show, Kat and I talk about things we find interesting. So let's get to today's topic. Where does love fit in war? And yes, we're doing it again. So we have a quote from Nirmala. Do you want me to go ahead and read this, right, Kat?
Sure.
Okay. What is love and where is it found? We search for love and try to get love, and yet it seems like we never get enough. Even when we found it, it can slip away as time passes. What if there is a source of love that never fades and is always available? What if love is as near and easy as breathing? What if you have been looking for love in all the wrong places instead of actually lacking love? And that was Nirmala. I love that quote.
It's a great quote. It is. And it also makes me think of that song. You're going to make me
Looking
sing
for
it.
Love in all the wrong places. Da-da-da-da. Yeah.
Yep.
Look, my singing voice is back. This is a miracle.
That's wonderful.
Well, yeah, I think it's so easy to look for love and think that it's someone else that needs to give it to me.
Yes.
I don't think it hit me until after my brilliant, beautiful meditation on the back patio, where I really felt that feeling, that zing, and that peace and beauty and all the colors, it just this sense of love. And I think it took a few days before it hit me that I was like, oh, that's the feeling I get that I used to think someone else was giving to me. Like if I was getting into a new relationship or anything like that, I always thought someone was giving that to me.
Mm-hmm.
And it was then that I realized, oh no, I made that feeling all myself. And I had no idea.
Yes. And wouldn't it be amazing if everybody had felt that? If everybody could feel that at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why we have this love war thing going on, is that we don't feel that love within ourselves, and we're constantly looking for outside validation.
Yeah.
So is the other person.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not validating them in the way that they want, conflict.
Oh, yeah. The other thing you reminded me of is, this weekend there was a question, what do you think of war? When you think of the word war. And my first thought was willing, angry response. And then I can't remember the second question, but all of a sudden there was a shift and I was able to think willing, accepting response. And I thought, wow, I could have an argument with someone. We could be in conflict or in war. And the outcome is so much more different than when I come from an accepting and understanding perspective than from an angry and frustrated perspective.
Right. Well, it's that shift in for me at least, it's that shift in how am I going to approach this? Am I approaching it in that if I am to have love, if I am to have acceptance, you must think the way I think, do what I want you to do, um, behave in the way that I want you to behave. And
Mm-hmm.
so if I'm in that, there's going to be conflict because if everybody's coming from that point of view, we all have our own opinions. And more often than not, those opinions are in conflict. But if we can get together and we can have that discussion and say, okay, I love myself, I value my opinion, but I value your opinion too. And I value it enough. I have enough love for myself to be realistic in the sense that I know it's not all about me.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that the relationship is more important than that want.
Then that want or need to be right. Is that kind of what
Yes,
you're talking
yes,
about? Okay.
yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, so that allows an openness to be able to say, I value you. I love you. What is your opinion?
Mm.
And then that
Mm-hmm.
opens up the conversation. Love it, all the songs, love is a key.
Mm-hmm.
It
Mm-hmm.
really is.
Okay, but so I had a friend of mine come over last week and say, um, is there really right and wrong? And her premise was something out of the scriptures, and it was about Lot's wife, and she was wrong to look back. And I said, was she? How do I know? So I mean, that's one place where it's really easy to get into. Well, she looked back; she was turned into a pillar of salt, therefore she was wrong. But I don't know. When I was talking to my friend, I was really coming from the perspective of how can I view that from love? You know, from if I look at it from another perspective, perhaps there was tremendous love and loss for the people that were being wiped away from the earth, right? In that story. And maybe a little bit of resentment toward God. I don't know, right? I don't really know. I'm just throwing some ideas out there
Mm-hmm.
that maybe it wasn't out. It wasn't wrong. Maybe it was actually out of love that she looked back for some, but maybe it was love for the wrong things. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, that's it. We don't know, but here is something. There are always consequences for our actions.
Mm-hmm.
So, in that case, there was a consequence for that action. And simplicity's sake, because humans like the dual, they like it black and white. So it's
Mm-hmm.
easy to say, yes, that she was wrong. It's
Mm.
easy to say, yes, I want this, I don't want that.
Mm-hmm.
Love is what brings you into that place where you can look at the gray areas. So you could say, and you could look at Lot's wife, and you could say, yeah, maybe there was love. There was still a consequence for her action,
Mm-hmm.
but we don't know what was going inside of her head. We make a judgment based on a morality black and white judgment. But
Mm-hmm.
looking at it in that way, yeah, that was a consequence of her action, but we don't know what was in her heart. We don't know if
Mm-hmm.
she was missing the place, if she was missing her friends, what made her turn around. We don't know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, you and I talked briefly about that after the show last week, so that's why I've been thinking about it a lot. And that's kind of what it came to. So if I insist, you and I are having this discussion, and if I am insistent on having my way, there's a consequence for that action. That's
Mm-hmm.
separation. you
Yeah.
know you're wrong, I'm right, we're going to do what I want to do, and if
Mm-hmm.
not, we're going to be at war.
Right. Which reminds me of a conversation I actually had with someone later in the week, wherein we were talking about, when people argue and there's arguments and things like that, and I said, there's a really interesting thing that happens when I see you as me. And when I see you as me, I I behave differently. If you are part of me, it's really interesting if you take that idea and you walk around and you start looking in your life, and as soon as a judgment pops into my head, I go, oh wait, that's me. How does that feel to not like that part of me? Like, and I think that's part of that non-duality, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
if we can see everyone else as part of us, maybe we don't have to be so mean about it. But also, right, I'm going to put but, I notice for me, when I'm angry and mad at myself, I'm also angry and mad at everyone else. So in that sense, does non-duality help? I don't think it really does. I have to first get to a different place, right?
Right, right. Here, something you had just said made me think of a story that I heard about the war in Ukraine, and some of the Russian soldiers were coming over, and they were looking at the people, and they were like, they look exactly like us. What are we doing here? And so when you said that, I look and I see that myself and others, that that just really struck me, and so that makes you think. Um, here's the thing about the war, the interior war too, and you and I've talked about this before. It's about loving those parts of yourself that aren't as lovable.
Mm.
So that when I'm angry or upset or disappointed in myself or I feel shame, I still have to love that part of myself, because otherwise I'm going to stay there and live in that place. And then there's going to be that war, that interior war. And yes,
Mm-hmm.
that spills out to the exterior.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're finding that internal love and you're saying, I'm going to love my entire being, I'm going to love the not so lovable parts of myself, and I'm going to nurture those parts of myself and do that. It's so much easier when you see those in other people.
Mm.
I know for me, when the people I tend to have the most conflict with are when I see something in them that I don't like in myself.
Ooh,
It just
isn't that true? That's like a universal truth that
yes,
I don't think most of us want to admit.
yes, yes, and that's where that love comes from. And I'm like, ooh, whenever I feel that, I'm like, this is something I need to look at. Why is
Mm-hmm.
that person pushing my buttons?
Mm. Almost like it's, what is it about them that I'm feeling triggered?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's been a real key to me in learning to love better, learning to
What do you
love
mean by
more.
better and more?
That's I didn't like that word, and that's why I hesitated. Um, maybe it's to a greater extent. It's to,
Mm-hmm.
to have that compassion. So I would see this, any person. So I'd see them and they'd be doing something or saying something or expressing something that I don't like in myself. And I just like, oh, this person just drives me crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And if I don't look at that, I'm just like, ooh, this person drives me crazy. I don't want anything to do with them. And I kind of, go off, and then I have this judgment in my head about that person.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But then when I think about it, why am I so triggered by this? What is it that I don't like? What is it that is bothering me? And I
Mm.
look and I usually see that quality in myself in some way. And so that person just magnified it. So then I take that and I'm like, okay, that's what's going on here. And I just kind of come to an acceptance of that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, maybe that's something I need to work on. And then I'm able to turn that around and give that compassion to the person who's amplifying whatever's inside of me. And I can love them in a way that I couldn't before. Have a compassion. And I think maybe I'm equating compassion with love, but I think compassion is a component of love.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to have that compassion for what they're feeling and what they're going through, because I have that within myself.
Mm. And having that within your, recognizing that that is inside of you, does it make it easier to love the other person? But as soon as you work out what's happening inside, maybe is it easier to love the other person that's provided the beautiful trigger?
For me, I'm discovering that yes. Now, I may not like them very much. It's not going to be the person I'm going to, go out and have a meal with necessarily, or look to have a meal with them. But it gives it, like I said, it gives me that compassion for them,
Mm-hmm.
and that kind of tenderness. Like, yes, you are hurting. I'm hurting too. I see your hurt in me, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to love that hurt.
Yeah. So there's, yeah, I'm just going to bring it up. There's this idea, I received a message last week from, or the week before, I can't remember, from someone, I will never, ever love Putin. And I thought to myself, could I, then I think it was, we had, you had put in something as in the search engine and about love and war, and
Mhm.
all of these quotes came up from Hitler.
Yes.
And then I got to thinking about how maybe in some ways power, like, it's like when I think something is happening or going wrong, or let's say I solve a problem for myself, and then I think, oh, I don't want everyone else to go through that misery, so I'm going to solve this problem for them, even though part of that, the human being fully human is going through that journey, right? Like, it's really important. But could that power simply be a scream for, I need love, you know? Or is it maybe love showing up saying, if I could just show them this way, I I equated it in some ways to, like, oh, I want someone to learn how to bowl, so I'm going to put the bumpers in the bowling lane.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go and bowl, but do you really learn how to bowl?
Right.
Because when the bumpers are gone, you're still going to go in the gutter. So you still have to learn. Maybe you get a better idea of, oh, how do I hold the ball so it could go down the center? But taking away the bumpers is still taking away the bumpers. And
Right.
why not just practice without the bumpers? I mean, just saying. I don't know.
Yeah. Here I'm thinking like this is helicopter parents.
Mm.
Yeah. And to those of you who out there who might, bristle at that term, just be patient.
I was
I
I
have a
was
point to
one
make.
at one point. So go on. I could see that it'd be.
Okay. Well, and of course, I mean, the thing is if we love our children, we want them to uh, to be able to not have to experience adversity in life. I mean, ideally, we know how hard that is. We know how difficult that is. Um, and I fully understand the actions and the emotions behind it. But in reality, if we really look, where did we learn our best lessons? Where did we learn how to deal with life? And that was in dealing with the adversity. When a child is learning to walk, they fall down, they bump their heads, they do it. You pick them up, you love them, it's okay, and you put them down and you let it do it again.
Mhm.
Why do we only do that when they're toddlers and learning to walk? Why don't we
Mm.
do that and let them face the consequences? People, how dare you give my daughter an F? How dare you not let my son make the baseball team? There are consequences,
Mhm.
for these things, and you don't always get what you want, and there are consequences to our actions. And it doesn't mean that you can't love that. That's the thing, is that I know for me growing up, if I screwed up, if I did something bad, I didn't feel loved. I felt like I was bad.
Mm. Mhm.
And I think it's harder to make that distinction. I even do that to my dogs. When they're acting up, bad dogs, go in your cages, and I have to give them a timeout. And they're dogs, so that's a little bit different. I don't think they hold on to it, because I love them in a few minutes and they're all happy again. But people are different. People hold on to that. They're not going to remember that you said I was a bad girl. They'll
Mhm.
remember that you said I was a bad girl. They won't remember the hug after the punishment.
I remember when I was learning love and logic, because this is essentially what you're talking about. Is what they talk about in that program. It's a parenting program, and I remember really working hard, even with the dogs, because because when my kids were young, it was like, oh, I want to I wanted to be the example, and that this something really neat happened inside of me when I included the dogs, because then um, there wasn't also it changed like that internal dialogue for me, and now I wasn't a bad dog. I just made a mistake. Yes, if any of you listened to the podcast on April Fools, we were purple dogs. And that's the audio version of the podcast that you find on Spotify and Apple and all those things. But but I think that then also, like, at least with the kids, I think they were more free to make mistakes. Or were they mistakes, right? Or was that just the journey that they had to go down? And it was really hard in some of those times to really, really, really love them when they're in the midst, as a mother to two girls, in the midst of really pushing my buttons, right? Like, but I needed to love them, and I wanted to love them, and I could also love what they were doing and know that that's what they had to do, and not take it. Then I didn't have to take it personally anymore.
Yeah. And it just brings up a whole lot of things surrounding shame. And I think shame is a side effect of not being loved in the
Or of
right
having to pay
way.
the price, right? Like,
Yes.
if you don't do X, then you are not loved. Whether they said it directly or indirectly doesn't matter, I don't think.
Right. And so, so take somebody like Putin. We know a little bit more about Hitler's upbringing, at least I do, to know kind of the psychological stuff that he went through and why. It's like, oh, okay, you know, connecting some of the dots. Not to say that everybody who goes through that experience is like that. It's complex. People are complex beings. It's not just one factor that, causes somebody to, be a Hitler or a Putin. Um, but what is that? And then I think there's this also collective psychosis that almost happens, that we have to be, in order to love ourselves or our group, we have to have a devil. We have to have somebody we hate,
Mm.
or somebody's going to do something to us.
Mm-hmm.
And just the kind of stuff that's coming out, and the kind of stuff that we hear in our political discourse daily from both sides of the aisle and here in the States, is this us versus them, this, again, this dualism, this black and white. Well, if
Mm-hmm.
you're not a Republican, you are a communist. If and from the left, if you are a Republican, you are a fascist.
Mm.
I mean, that kind of back and forth stuff, and it's just like there's so much nuance in between.
Mm-hmm.
It's not one or the other. It
Yeah.
is, um, different. So like with Putin and the Ukraine, saying all this stuff about the Ukraine is doing this and the Ukraine is doing that, and the people are hearing that and believe that because, why are they censoring the media in Russia? Because they want
Mm-hmm.
this one message to come out. They don't want there to be other messages. And so people get behind that and they think that. And yes, if we love our country, if we love our people, of course we're going to have to go to war because these people are against us.
Mm.
Instead
It
of
just makes.
being
Oh, go
open to
ahead.
the more complex issues. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we even saw this non-duality during, or this duality during COVID. I mean, we're still experiencing it. If you don't get vaccinated, you're wrong. If you do get vaccinated, then you're a sheeple. Or I don't, I'm trying to think of some of the things I've heard out there. Like, we did it here too. And it was
Yeah.
very confusing. That was the interesting thing about, I think, living in the United States and hearing all of the different perspectives, which, while confusing, really allowed, I think, people to make the decision for themselves. Whether I agree with that decision or not, I'm not totally certain it matters. Right? Like, sure. Okay, there are going to be people that follow things that I think are totally out of whack and make absolutely no sense. But how do I know that's not the right journey for them? And is there a part of me that maybe needs to listen to that part of me that, maybe that's courageous in my mind? If I really start
Right.
pondering and thinking about it, maybe it's really courageous that these people are doing that. But I mean, I don't know. I
Yeah.
hmm.
Well,
Hmm.
it's hard. And I've been pondering those questions, and here's what it comes down to for me is just realize that we are all people, we are all the same, and just try and love them. And for me, to kind of give the message is to, not fall into those traps. We talked about, a while back in one of our sessions, we talked about some quotes from the book. I have it right here. You Are Not So Smart. Talking about the ways that we think. We think we are smart, but we don't look at all sides. And I think keeping an open mind is the best way you can love yourself, because once you close a door, I have a decision.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to change my mind, and you dig your heels in, you're not open anymore.
Yeah.
It's
And if we
okay.
come,
I have this opinion, but I'm
mm-hmm.
open to hear your opinion and why you think the way that you do.
Yeah. And I think if we come from that perspective of love is forgiving and not for forgetting, like not to forgive and not to forget, but love is to be given, not to be gotten.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and if I remember that and then can stay curious about, yeah, I know my sign. I love my
Mm-hmm.
sign. Um, Stay curious about what is it in this situation that I'm not willing to love, or I'm not willing to see or have empathy and compassion. And that doesn't mean not having boundaries and or things like that. In fact, if anything, it allows me to see a little clearer and know exactly where I feel like I need to be so that I can still love. right? Because like, even for instance, I'll use the kids again, you know, it is it loving to allow to let one of them stay home from school, or is it not? Well, maybe the loving thing to do is to make sure they're at school, and maybe on another day the loving thing to do is to let them stay home from school. So I don't think it's as easy as we want to say it is. It is definitely not black and white.
I would agree with you on that, and I know we're at time, so I'd just like to close with this for our viewers to ponder. Is the question is love understanding?
Mm. So the question is love understanding? If you feel like it, put some comments below the video when it's done. There's also a Relatively Damaged podcast where I interview amazing guests who've overcome some sort of struggle and how they found hope and healing. You can find it on podcasts, Spotify, Apple, many more. I'm sorry, you can find the podcast on Spotify, Apple, many more. I'm Angela, and this is our amazing friend, Kat.
We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.